Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about LvlUp Expo 2024's B+ tier that took place this weekend in Las Vegas. And our top 16 finishers are going to be Monty, Loaf, MFA, and Society Man in 13th. Cosmos, Mr. E, Lima, and Wrath in 9th. In 7th, you're going to have Luis and Chase. 5th is Jazo, Capitancito. 4th is TWEEK. 3rd is MUTEACE. 2nd was SONIX. And winning the entire thing was Light. And full discretion right now, 90% of this video is going to be me talking just about the top 4 because this event was extremely top heavy. I'm still going to mention the top 8 finishers because they got top 8 at a pretty stacked event. They do deserve a mention. But if you want to hear about people that weren't in this top 8, just leave a comment down below and I'll tell you how their run was. And be sure to sub while you're down there. But let's get right into it. But actually, before we get right into it, there is one player that I wanted to mention that did not get into the top 8, and that is going to be Society, man. They're a local talent from Las Vegas, and they are a Zelda player who ended up getting 13th place. After losing to TWEEK fairly early on, they had a super solid losers run, beating Pokepen, Jojo de Homo, Nitro, and Shine before falling to Jazzo, so just big shouts to them for that run. So our 7th place finishers are going to be the two Palutena players of Chase and Luis. Starting off with Luis, he's going to pick up wins on Demon, Ludo, Marvelous Marco, Monty, and Cosmos, only losing to Wrath and Capitancito. And he absolutely could have won that Capitancito set. It was extremely competitive, but Capitancito manages to clutch it out. And Luis is fundamentally such an incredible player, and I feel like if he just had honestly more faith in himself, he would be one of the best players in the entire world, because whenever he goes for a crazy hard read, a majority of the time it ends up panning out. That's why he's the best Palutena player in the world when he uses her smash attacks, because he's so intelligent. But when it gets to these bigger events, it feels like he's a lot more scared to kind of pull the trigger, and because of that, you see him losing a lot earlier than you would. And LvlUp Expo wasn't quite a major, and he technically does underperform because he was the 6th seed at the event, but 7th place at a regional of this level, or maybe a national, I don't know what a B+ tier is called, but whatever, you get my point. Very impressive run by Luis. He's an incredible player, and I hope he continues to getting these really good results going into 2024, because full bias, I just like watching him. And speaking of players that I like watching, Chase, he has been on such a massive uptick recently. After his pretty subpar performance at Genesis, he ends up getting 49th there. Then he ends up getting 33rd at Collision. That's pretty good. And then he goes crazy, winning PSK Showdown number 7 over players like Mr. E, Sky J, Alendis. Like, that is super impressive. And he keeps up the momentum going into this event, picking up wins on Abby, then MFA, and Lima. Most notably, getting a Lima win is super good. And he only loses to Mr. E and Jazo. And you've been seeing Chase play a lot more characters recently besides the Palutena. He's been playing Aegis, he's been playing Steve, but Palu is definitely still his best character. I would call him the best Palutena player in the US. Honestly, in contention for the best Palutena player in the world, because Jigaimo hasn't been doing a ton of stuff in 2024, unless I've just been missing all of it. So Chase definitely should be shooting for that best Palu spot, because he is really, really good. Our 5th place finishers are going to be Jazo and Capitancito, starting off with Jazo, and he ends up falling to Light in the winner's side, but he does manage to take it to Game 5, and Ken does do pretty good versus Fox, so it makes sense that Jazo was able to have a competitive set here, but considering that Light ended up winning the tournament, this is an extremely impressive showing, and in the loser's bracket, it only gets better, where he 3-0s MUTEACE and Society Man before beating Wrath in a Game 5, as well as 3-0ing Chase once in the top 8, and he ends up getting 3-0'd himself by TWEEK. But that Wrath win is, in my opinion, the most impressive win of the entire tournament, because prior to this, Wrath had a 15-0 record on Jazo. He finally gets his first win on the board. Gotta be feeling amazing about that, especially at a big event like this. A majority of the time that these guys have played, it is going to be at a local, because they are both from the same scene, but Jazo gets it when it matters the most. Huge props to him for that, and also just the amazing run. Really excited to see what this guy is going to be doing in Japan. And speaking of players I'm excited about, Capitancito, another really solid run from him. Whenever he shows up, he just has incredible results. He ends up getting sent down to the loser side by MUTEACE in another Game 5 set that he absolutely could have won, before beating Shu, Loaf, Mr. E to get into the top 8. Once in the top 8, he barely ekes that set out over Luis before falling to SONIX in an extremely competitive Game 5. Capitancito and SONIX have played each other so many times. I believe the record is 19-31. I have it pulled up in front of me. I don't know why I said I believe. And there are a lot of those sets that Capitancito is winning. As you can see, 19-31 versus SONIX is extremely good. And SONIX also think that B Gunner beats Sonic, and I can guarantee you that is because of Capitancito. He plays that matchup extremely well. He's a very intelligent player, easily the best Mii Gunner player in the world. Claw is also very good, but Capitancito is a world above the other ones. I really hope that we get to see this guy travel more because he's just such a fun player to watch with an underrepresented character. So let's dive into this juicy top 4, starting with our 4th place finisher, which is going to be TWEEK. And he was the 2nd seed of the event, so technically an underperformance, but also he lost to SONIX and Light, so not really. He's going to pick up wins on Society Man, Illusion, MFA, and Mr. E to get into the top 8, only dropping 1 game to Mr. E, so shouts to Mr. E for that. He ends up getting 3-0'd by Light in the winner's side, all Diddy Kong versus Fox. Then he ends up 3-0ing Jazzo before falling to SONIX 3-1. And in the first 2 games, it's the Diddy Kong. He doesn't end up winning. He goes to the Sephiroth on game 3, manages to take it, but it does not win him the set. And TWEEK is in a really interesting spot right now because if you were to ask a computer which character should TWEEK play, Sephiroth would never appear on that list. It would be like a million iterations before he finally does, but we live in the real world. Computers aren't making the decisions for us, and the TWEEK Sephiroth is, number 1, very, very good. He is by far the best Sephiroth player in the entire world, especially considering that Ken has dropped the character now. There is a huge gap between him and probably M4E being the 2nd best one, and that's not a shot at M4E. He is also incredible, but TWEEK is just excellent with this character. The problem is the character just isn't very good. And there are a couple matches where you can get value from the Sephiroth. Specifically, I think Game & Watch is a really good choice there. We saw it do decent versus Sonic, and I think Sephiroth has tools versus Sonic. I don't know if it's necessarily a better choice than Diddy Kong, but it's not the end of the world. But it does hurt me when there are characters like Corrin who are at TWEEK's disposal. I want everyone to play Corrin, I'm not going to lie, but especially TWEEK. It covers every single one of his problem matchups. Most notably, you're going to have Sonic, Steve, and Game & Watch being the main ones that are giving him a problem right now, and Corrin does exceptional into all 3 of those characters, but Sephiroth isn't a terrible choice into those characters as well, and I know that TWEEK can make this Sephiroth work, which is easily the most frustrating part about that character, because when he pulls it out, I either want him to win super hard, or I want him to lose super hard so the Sephiroth never comes back, and the Sephiroth always just does good enough where it's like justifiable for him to play it, and I'm curious to see which characters he's going to end up going with. At the end of the day, I think TWEEK can make it work with anyone. It's just a little bit harder for which character that he's choosing. In 3rd place, you're going to have MUTEACE, and he's going to pick up wins on Hungrybox, Snoop, Capitancito in that really close Game 5, like I mentioned, and Lima to get into the top 8. And the Lima win's got to be feeling pretty good because those are players that go back and forth all the time. Overall, it is going to be in MUTEACE's favor, 17-11, but that's an extremely scary matchup to get in the bracket when you just are so experienced against that player. But MUTEACE manages to come out on top to get into the top 8. Once in the top 8, he manages to get arguably the most impressive win of the tournament. I still think that it's Jazzo over Wrath just because the record is so bad, but this one is also insane. He manages to 3-1 SONIX to get to the winners finals. Once in the winners finals, he ends up losing to Light 3-1 as well as to SONIX 3-1 in the run back, but both of those matchups are very difficult for Peach, and the fact that he was able to win Sonic Peach at all is so impressive to me. The best part about Peach is going to be her microspacing and her damage output. Really difficult to microspace versus Sonic because of how much space he is able to cover in such a fraction of time. And also, his damage output matches Peach. Maybe even better than Peach in certain aspects. The disadvantage is bad for the character. Just, it's a bad matchup, and MUTEACE managed to overcome. He's been looking really good in his more recent events. He's got a 5th place at Game is Game, 3rd place here. He ends up getting a 2nd place at Cirque du CFL as well, and a 3rd place at Invasion. He has just been on a tear recently, and I definitely think MUTEACE is in a form right now where he can win his first major event, and any single one that he goes to, especially now that he has a win over SONIX, there's very few people who can definitely stand in his way, so I'm excited to see if he manages to do it. In 2nd place, you're going to have SONIX once again. He's going to pick up wins on Nexus, Monty, and Wrath to get into the top 8. Once in the top 8, he ends up losing that set to MUTEACE like I mentioned earlier, but he beats Capitancito in extremely close Game 5, then he beats TWEEK and MUTEACE 3-1 for both of those sets. And in the grand finals, he manages to reset the bracket versus Light 3-1, but ultimately loses Game 5 in the reset. And it has been so long since we've seen SONIX and Light actually play up against each other. The last time was MomoCon, where SONIX was able to get his first ever win versus Light. Prior to that, I believe it was like 6-1 or 7-1 in Light's favor. The record now is going to be sitting at a 2-9 in Light's favor still, because Light ultimately does win the reset. And this unfortunately doesn't really answer any questions that I had for the SONIX light set, because for a while this is honestly the biggest question mark in Smash Ultimate for me, because you have SONIX with extremely good adaptation, amazing edge guarding, and he's just really good in these close corner situations. That's why he's the best Sonic player in the world, because his boxing and aggression is the best with the character. And you have Light, who is the best Fox player in the world, which is probably Sonic's worst matchup. And it is a difficult thing for us to predict how it's going to go, even though the matchup says it probably should be going towards Light. Sonic's adaptation is so good, but the record is on Light's favor, and we finally get the answer that we've been waiting for so long, and they just end up trading sets. Now, in the game count, SONIX does win more, so maybe you would predict him going into their next set, but it shows this is extremely competitive. Work does pay off, but Light hasn't been quite figured out yet by SONIX, so we're going to have to see if he's able to even do that, because he's definitely done it with a couple of players, but doing that to Light is a whole nother task. And now we have that conversation of, can SONIX be the best player in the world if he only gets second place for the rest of the season? And hopefully we're not going to have to answer that question, because he'll just win a major, and I can almost guarantee you that he is going to win a major at some point. But the streak, it isn't broken at this event, both for getting a lower placement and a higher placement, so I guess you can't complain. And your big winner of LvlUp Expo, the back-to-back champion, is Light. He's going to pick up wins on Frog, Jazzo, and Cosmos to get into the top 8. Once in the top 8, he gets that really nice 3-0 over TWEEK, and overall, Light is going to have a winning record on TWEEK. It's going to be 12-11, but TWEEK has been doing a lot better in their more recent encounters, so this has got to be a really good win for Light, especially in a 3-0 fashion. And I also want to mention that the last 5 sets that these players have played, the person that wins it in a sweep. There hasn't been a game in the other person's favor, which is really interesting to me. I think it's just telling of who is playing better that day. Light and TWEEK have both said that they have very specific game styles that they play for that one matchup, and it just seems like Light game plan was a little bit better going into this event. He also ends up beating MUTEACE in the winners finals to get into the grand finals, and that is a matchup where Fox is definitely favored, but MUTEACE has shown in the past that he can take out a player of Light's caliber, because he's literally beaten Light before in the matchup, so it's always a little bit scary, but he managed to overcome it to get into the grand finals. Once in the grand finals, he loses that first set to SONIX, but manages to win the reset. Game 5, very competitive game 5 as well. All of them were last stock, last hit, and I highly recommend that you watch it, because it was just an absolute banger. And with this win, Light is in a pretty good spot, and we have to ask the question, can Light be the best player in the world for 2024? And I do think that it is, yes. He does have that 17th at Circus CFL where he loses to Applewiz, which is definitely not a great look on his resume, but outside of that, he's been really good. He gets a major win at Invitational. He's got 5th at both Collision and Genesis. He's a 7th at Luminosity, makes big moves. He's got a 5th at the Luminosity Invitational. He's been very consistent overall, and if he can continue having these uptick results where he's able to beat players like TWEEK and MUTEACE and SONIX, I think he's got a real shot of being the best in the world, but we're just going to have to wait and see how the rest of the season unfolds, because there's also like 8 other players who are in that conversation right now. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The support has been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!